They got shotguns and pistols standing all around my door. They got shotguns and pistols standing all around my door. They haunt me all night long, so I can't sleep no more. The blue ghost haunts me all night, the nightmare rides me all night long. The blue ghost haunts me at night, the nightmare rides me all night long. They wanted me to song this haunted house, I wish I were dead and gone.
I'm sure most of you have heard of Robert Johnson, and if you haven't, he's considered one of the major pioneers of blues, leading into rock and roll, and eventually all kinds of other types of music, from R&B to extreme heavy metal, especially with the whole mythology behind Robert Johnson and selling his soul to the devil and all that stuff. But I'm sure most of you have never heard of Lonnie Johnson. And the thing is, Lonnie Johnson was playing sophisticated blues and jazz 10 years before Robert Johnson, maybe even earlier than that. So the point is, a lot of the hype and mythology around Robert Johnson is not necessarily a confirmation of his revolutionary status as a guitar player. I mean, they talk about the Delta blues style, and of course, he's got lots of style. So in that sense, he's in a category by himself. But if you really want to get into it, ability-wise and technical-wise, Lonnie Johnson could arguably have been superior, because his style, even 10 years before, was just a lot more controlled, but had a similar depth and fullness to it. Robert Johnson's style, if anything, is a little more unhinged, and the meter shifts a lot more because he's sort of attacking his instrument. And it may be hard to tell because they're old recordings, and it's hard to get the aggression in the music if you're not used to hearing it. But if you compare them side by side, you can really hear the difference between a really controlled, carefully plotted out style, and then something that's a little more unhinged and sort of attacking you. And that's not a criticism on Robert Johnson. I mean, and let's remember, we're talking 10 years apart here. So as music evolves and we look through time, we see that music tends to get a little more aggressive as time goes on, and with the technology as well. Even 5-10 years can make a difference. Sound can be a little more in your face just a few years later because of advancing techniques. So in a sense, we're comparing apples to oranges, but the point I'm making here is that as good as Robert Johnson was, and I'm a fan myself, I love his playing, love listening to the recordings, he is a bit overhyped. And the question is, why does everyone know who Robert Johnson is, but nobody knows who Lonnie Johnson is, or even maybe Son House, or some of these other individuals that influenced Robert Johnson? Why is he such a focus? Why do people like Eric Clapton and Keith Richards and all these like British white blues guys who, they're not even American, and they're relating to this, black bluesman from the 30s who sold his soul to the devil? Like, what is the big deal there? Led Zeppelin, a big part of the mythology behind their image in the 70s, you could say was rooted, or possibly even taken from the mythology we find in American Southern blues. How could a bunch of British guys, session musicians, in the industry, obviously like privileged far beyond, the bluesmen they're trying to emulate, a whole different country. I mean, Robert Plant, I think, was 18 or something when he sang, Good Times, Bad Times on the first Led Zeppelin album. Has this kid from England who's already, in this all-star band where everyone just shreds and that's the top of their game, and they're on TV and they're getting all this hype, and this guy doesn't know about slavery and working in the fields, Robert Plant, but he's got the soul. He gets it. Obviously, Led Zeppelin's a great band. I'm not knocking them either, but trying to get to the bottom of what is this thing, the British invasion, with these British people taking on American accents and even trying to sound like Southern black bluesmen. Why don't they just sing like Englishmen? That's their accent. I mean, how many American bands can, do a song that's in, one British accent from like Birmingham, and then another song that, is a Liverpool accent, and another song that was a Manchester accent? I mean, talking about things that occur, the down and out activities in these different British towns. How many American musicians do you know that do this? None. Americans don't sit there and talk about being down and out in England. But why were the British doing it? Why were the British talking about being down and out in New York? Why were the Rolling Stones talking about being in New York City? And trying to talk like they're from the South and that they're black. What is this? And this whole thing about Satan, and taking the mythology behind Satan and the way that made it into heavy metal music. And you got these British punk bands of the 70s, like Venom, punk thrash band from 79, 80, feeding Satan back to Americans, times 10. The whole Satan thing has been, and even documentaries you watch say this, that the whole Satan thing, mythology behind Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil and all this stuff, a lot of that kind of blew up after he was already gone. So it was obviously taken as a way to market him, and perhaps even market different genres of music. And what it ends up doing is mesmerizing people. You get mesmerized by Satan. I mean, I speak from experience. Black Sabbath is one of my favorite bands, and you get mesmerized by the evil quality that you think is associated with it. The creepy lady on the front of the album cover, the weird background, and Ozzy Osbourne, and these dark young men doing this heavy, brutal music. There's a certain mesmerizing quality to it. The mystery draws you in. But I mean, when we're talking about suffering, when someone like when John Lee Hooker is singing, and you can just feel and see the pain, being revealed in his voice and in his style and his music, we're in awe of it. But at the same time, do you really want to be that? Do you want to feel that pain? Do you want to live a life of pain and misery so that you can emulate the sounds and move people that way? Is that really what you want? If you think about it, why the hell would you want to be miserable? Why would you want to be a miserable human being? Even if people were listening and going, nodding their head, it doesn't make you any less miserable. I mean, if it did, then you wouldn't be miserable anymore. You couldn't move people in that same way. You got to be able to, there's some role playing we can do. Led Zeppelin can sing the blues and the Rolling Stones, and they can convince you that they're sad and they lost their woman and they're down and out and they're broke, but they're not broke. You know what I mean? They're millionaires. And maybe they get sad, but they probably get sad because they're so rich that they maybe feel a little bit of meaninglessness in their lives at times. I'm sure they have their moments where they wonder, what does this mean that I'm unhappy and I'm this rich and I have everything I want? I mean, I'm sure there's a certain emptiness that some of these popular artists feel that we could never fathom. But I mean, that's not the same as being completely broke and not having any place to live. And I just think ultimately, the Satan in music thing is largely contrived, mostly so record companies can sell records and make money and probably promote blasphemy. Because, when you're young, it's fun to break the rules. It's fun to step outside the box. And you get older and you start noticing that what holds society together is, decency. You need laws and you need morals. You need structure. Not to the point of fascism or communism, but you need some kind of structure in a society. And, breaking rules can be liberating, but when it becomes a fetish, like breaking rules as a rule, just to break them, because you think, maybe it makes you feel more youthful or it gives you some kind of meaning. Breaking rules is cool when you're in a restrictive environment where you feel oppressed. But when you're free and you've got a lot going for you and you're just breaking rules just to be rebellious, just to be obnoxious, well, now you're just an asshole. Now you're just a self-centered, perhaps even narcissistic asshole with no real goal other than just creating chaos. So trying to separate out our awe of the music and appreciation of the music, trying to separate that from the impact culturally and the manner in which it is used in society to influence us in ways that we may not necessarily be aware of and that may even be to our own detriment. Just some stuff to think about.